Part 4. The House of Everything I Created. Author, Yinian Luan Tianji. Chapter 31. There was a faint coldness all over his body, and with his arrival, the snakes, insects, rats, and ants near the sewer entrance dispersed in a rush. Squeak. The crawling sound kept coming. This is the sound they make when they run away and scream, as if the god of death has come here. In the black robe, there is a pair of dead eyes, as if he is the god of death. Did you enter from here? The cold voice was like the cold wind of the winter solstice, making people shiver. The man in black robe walked towards the sewer. The dark wind blew and the black robe slowly fluttered, which was indescribably weird. The inside of the sewer and the outside world seemed to be two different worlds. They were completely dark. Occasionally, a little light would fall from the manhole cover on the road. The sound of rushing water sounded very harsh in this dead sewer. Qinlei was in front, with a light above his head, illuminating the road ahead. Li Qiuyu held a tablet in his left hand, which showed their location. Surely Sakuramiya said, "This time our mission is to deal with the source of the resentful ghost incident in the sewer. Based on the current preliminary investigation by the family's technical department, there is a problem with the underground central sewerage system in the middle of the sewer city. Some workers disappeared in that area, and our goal now is to get there." The group of people began to move along the sewer steps without saying a word. Every time he reached a fork in the road, Li Qiuyu would remind Qinlei to turn or go straight. Each of them has a headlamp on their head to illuminate the front. Lin Yi moved forward in this darkness, perhaps because of his true destiny. Although it was dark, he could see most objects in the darkness. Even if he encounters an emergency, he can handle it calmly. A faint fragrance wafted from the two people in front of Sakura Gong Shirley and Li Qiuyu. His eyes fell on the back of Shirley Sakuranomiya's neck. Even in the darkness, he could see a piece of snow-white and delicate skin. Although the graceful figure is wearing a robe, her figure is still looming in the air as she moves. This Shirley Sakuramiya is unfathomable, and the power within her body is majestic. She is stronger than me. She has completely entered the martial arts realm above the summit. With such a powerful cultivation level, she is actually so careful about the incident of resentful spirits in the sewers. It seems that I have to be very careful, so as not to be used as cannon fodder for others. Touching the two rings on his left hand, they were quite powerful. At critical moments, they were enough to turn things around. Wow! The sewer was filled with the sound of sewage flushing, and a strong odor became stronger as they entered the depths of the sewer. However, Lin Yi was surprised that the strong odor seemed to be unable to enter even 1 meter away from Sakura Gong Shirley. A faint fragrance resisted the invasion of the stench. Lin Yi walked behind Shirley Yinjiang, and the distance between the two was just at the edge of the fragrance. He could clearly feel the instantaneous change in the smell. It's really mysterious. Is this some kind of skill? Is it related to the fragrance? Thinking of this, Lin Yi was itching unbearably, and he vaguely realized that the method mastered by Shirley Yinjiang was unusual. The last time I observed Shirley Sakuramiya, his spiritual energy consumption was huge. He knew that he could not observe beings more powerful than himself at will. Once the time was too long, big problems would arise. But he already has a way to deal with it, the intermittent observation method. A flash of blue light appeared in his eyes, and the solution to his true destiny was opened. The scenery in front of me changed drastically, countless colorful gaseous substances filled the surroundings, and I felt sick looking at it. The area within 1 meter of Shirley Sakuramiya's body was enveloped in a gaseous substance in the shape of flowers. A method of operation in her body that was more than 3 times more complicated than the mighty Diamond Sutra appeared in Lin Yi's eyes. All this only lasted for 3 seconds before Lin Yi closed his true fate interpretation. I felt my own spiritual wave, and 1/10 of it was consumed in 3 seconds. Observing beings that are more powerful than yourself is really terrifying. Although it only lasted for 3 seconds, Lin Yi gained a lot. He had already memorized a small part of the magic methods that worked in Shirley Yinzhang's body. As long as he continues to observe, he can always fully master Sakuramiya Shirley's method. He has grasped the most important role of the true life Taoist interpretation and can learn almost all techniques secretly. Once successful, it can be used immediately, which is a terrifying ability. He has great expectations for the second seal that is being brewed. Hoo-hoo! A faint dark wind blew by, and everyone trembled and shuddered involuntarily. Lin Yi's face hardened. Be on guard. After hearing Lin Yi's words, everyone immediately stopped, tensed up and entered a fighting state. Lin Yi's eyes opened with the light of true destiny, and the world in front of him changed. A dark resentment filled the sewer ahead. Looking deeper, a layer of resentment divided the sewer into 2 worlds. Shirley Yinzhang looked at Lin Yi looking left and right and frowned. What did you see? Everyone's eyes fell on Lin Yi. Turning off the true fate interpretation and no longer consuming spiritual waves, Lin Yi looked serious. From now on, everyone must exercise the highest level of vigilance. We have entered the scope of the Wraith incident. I have already felt the unique resentment permeating the air. Sakuramiya Shirley's expression darkened, her right index and middle fingers came together, and a faint force flowed through them. She raised her finger and gently passed it in front of her eyes. A force condensed and attached to her eyes. Like 2 bright lights, her eyes lit up with a faint red light. The world in her eyes has changed a lot. A faint resentment filled the surroundings, and she narrowed her eyes. Lin Yi is telling the truth. We have to be careful on the road ahead. Stand still, I will open your spiritual eyes for you. As the voice fell, Sakuramiya Shirley's finger appeared with a faint red light, and it passed towards Li Qiuyu's eyes. Li Qiuyu obviously believed in Sakuramiya Shirley, and did not move, letting her finger pass in front of her eyes. The next moment, her eyes were already glowing with a faint red light. After Li Qiuyu, it was Huang Bing and Qin Lei, as well as housekeeper Xia Qiu. Seeing that he was the only one left behind, Lin Yi smiled and said, Miss Sakuramiya, I'm still here. Sakuramiya Shirley glanced at him. You can see the resentment, but you still want me to open your eyes. I can't use this ability continuously, it consumes a lot of energy. Frowning, Sakuramiya Shirley raised her hand and passed it in front of Lin Yi's eyes. A faint red light flashed, and his eyes were covered with a faint red light. At this time, Sakuramiya Shirley didn't know that a layer of green light that she couldn't see flashed through Lin Yi's eyes. Instantly, he captured the flow of power on Sakuramiya Shirley's fingers, a very precise and light fluctuation. The House of Everything I Created. Author, Yinian Luan Tianji. Chapter 32. Spiritual eyes are a very complex operation of power, covering more than 35 unknown acupuncture points and meridians on the fingers. Obviously, this is some kind of hidden meridian acupoints, which belongs to the secret skills of some sects. True Destiny Deja quickly recorded the operation of this power in his mind, and Lin Yi closed the True Destiny Deja in an instant. This time, 1/3 of the spiritual waves were consumed. After these 3 consumptions, the spiritual waves in his body were less than 3/5. The next is a dangerous journey. He will not use the spiritual waves at will. He needs to wait for it to recover by itself. A piece of resentment appeared in front of him, which was the same as what he saw when he opened the True Destiny, but not as fine as the True Destiny. The resentment seen by the True Destiny Deja was clear to every trace, while the spiritual eyes saw a bunch of resentment. After Sakuramiya Swili opened the spiritual eyes for everyone, the breath on her body also dropped a little. However, as the power in her body operated, a faint energy in the void was being absorbed into her body and quickly refined. This kind of fluctuation is invisible to ordinary people. However, Lin Yi's eyes were affected by the True Destiny solution. Under normal circumstances, he also had some vague visual perception of energy. At this time, with the blessing of the spiritual eye, he could see the changes of Sakuramiya's willy. The speed of refining external energy is so fast. Resisting the urge to peek at the other party's skills again, Lin Yi looked around. Entering the range covered by resentment, anything could happen, he needed to be careful. Several people continued to move forward, and they became more cautious as they walked. There was a faint red light in their eyes, and they looked around. Huang Bing, who was walking behind the crowd, was very careful. He would look back almost every 5 seconds. While walking, his body was also slightly diagonal. His right hand had taken off the scimitar, the blade was slightly drooping, and the blade was facing the back. This is a state that can attack at any time, always alert to attacks from the rear, and rich experience. Lin Yi glanced at Huang Bing and nodded slightly with satisfaction. This person is not bad, Sakuramiya's willy is well prepared. About 10 minutes later, they came to a sewer intersection. This is a crossroad, with an intersection of hundreds of square meters, and in the middle is a bottomless sewage. Li Qiuyu said in a deep voice, "Take the passage on the left, which leads to the sewage treatment center." Qin Lei held up a large shield and walked along the steps, heading towards the sewer on the left. I don't know if it's an illusion, Lin Yi feels that there is a strange smell in the smell of sewage here. It seems to be the smell of something rotting. The smell of a corpse? And the smell of disinfectant. Why is there disinfectant? A trace of doubt rose in his heart, and his eyes looked at the deep and dark sewers around him. The yellow soldier behind him was still vigilantly performing his duties, but he didn't know when it started. A gray shadow appeared behind him, and a faint chill made him uncomfortable all over. He felt a little heavy on his neck, as if something was pressing on him. With his brows furrowed, he couldn't help but move his shoulders to relieve the heaviness, but it was useless. He shook his head and thought to himself, "It seems that I haven't rested well recently and I'm not in good condition. This mission is over, I want to take a good vacation for a month. I heard that the seaside city 100 miles away from Honglian City is a resort, we can go there to relax." Huang Bing had a thought in his mind and continued to follow the team. A shadow appeared behind him, that is a man in gray overalls. The eyes are empty, there are no eyeballs, only 2 black holes. The face is full of stains, 2 blood tears fall, and a mouth like a black hole is empty. Its chin just pressed on Huang Bing's head, and its hands were on Huang Bing's shoulders. The whole body was pressed against Huang Bing's back, and a stream of black resentment emanated from it. It flowed into Huang Bing's body along the place where it touched Huang Bing. A trace of black traces spread towards Huang Bing's body like a spider web. If someone looked at Huang Bing at this time, they would be scared to death. His face gradually turned pale, covered with countless black threads, covering all the skin on his body. Even in the whites of his eyes, there were countless black spiderweb-like threads. But he himself did not notice it at all, just felt that his body was slightly heavy. A trace of vitality that could not be seen by the naked eye was disappearing from Huang Bing's body. It flowed into the ghost behind him along the black spiderweb-like threads all over his body. A faint moan of satisfaction echoed in this dead sewer. Oh ah oh ah. The sound was so low that it was almost undetectable. About 30 minutes later, they passed through this long sewer and came to a huge hole. On the water surface here, a huge sewage treatment center emerged from the water, with an underground hole of thousands of square meters. Countless sewage poured into this underground hole from countless other mouths, and then flowed into the sewage treatment center. A strong stench hit everyone's face, and everyone couldn't help but cover their noses. The sewage flowing into the sewage treatment center, after a series of complex treatments, turned into a slightly clear stream of water flowing out. Li Qiuyu's cold voice sounded, "Ms. Sakuramiya, this is the sewage treatment center of the Sakuramiya group. Workers have been missing one after another for a month, and the last collective disappearance was also here. According to the testimony of past related parties, Shall we start the search now? Sakuramiya surely looked at this place in silence. The light above Qinlei's head occasionally swept across this huge empty dark space, bringing a ray of light. Let's start. Li Qiuyu received the order and said in a serious voice, Huang Bing, go turn on the lighting system here. Qinlei, you and I will go to the platform of the sewage treatment center to check and search. Yes. The voices of Qinlei and Huang Bing sounded. But Lin Yi frowned. Huang Bing's voice behind him was hoarse and low, as if he had become a different person. Instantly, he instinctively turned around and looked at Huang Bing, his pupils shrank, and his body felt a chill. In his eyes, Huang Bing's muscles were dry, his face was haggard, and his eyes were sunken, just like a refugee who had been hungry for years. And behind Huang Bing, a ghostly figure of a worker in work clothes was attached to his back. The empty eyes stared at Lin Yi strangely. Without any hesitation, Lin Yi rushed up in a flash. The spiritual wave in his left hand was spreading, and the Great Power Diamond Sutra was running, covering a blue-gold power. As fast as thunder, a punch hit Huang Bing's head. As soon as Lin Yi moved, Huang Bing instinctively resisted. His instinct after hundreds of battles made him react, but the next moment, his body became weak and he couldn't even lift his hands. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The House of Everything I Created. Author, Yinian Luan Tianji. Chapter 33. At this time, Huang Bing realized that something seemed to be wrong with his body. A blue gold fist rushed to Huang Bing's head at lightning speed. The head of the worker's ghost there let out a terrifying scream. This was a scream that went straight to the soul, but it had no power. Bang! A kind of mental muffled sound, the worker's ghost was instantly hit by Lin Yi. It was directly knocked off Huang Bing's back by Lin Yi's punch. The head turned into nothingness in mid-air, but it did not dissipate. The body flew backwards several meters under Lin Yi's power, crashed into the wall, and disappeared. The changes on Lin Yi's side also alarmed the people in front. What's going on? Sakuramiya Swili's eyes flashed with a fierce light, and she shouted coldly. The searchlight on Qinlei's head had already shone over, and the light was bright. When they saw Huang Bing behind them, the expressions of all of them were instantly silent. Hiss. The sound of taking a breath of cold air came one after another, and everyone's eyes were wide open. Li Qiuyu and Qinlei were shocked, and a trace of panic flashed through their faces. Huang Bing looked like a skeleton, with dry skin and wrinkles all over his face. A trace of black spider web-like lines covered his whole body. Huang Bing also felt something was wrong at this time, and a hoarse voice rang out, "What's wrong with me?" With the help of Qinlei's searchlight and the small light on his head, he lowered his head to look at himself. When he saw his hands, his whole body was shocked and he made a terrified sound. What's wrong with my hands? What's wrong with my voice? He looked at everyone with horror and fear, and his whole body shook. Huang Bing felt that he had lost his strength and fell into the sewage next to him. Not good, Li Qiuyu screamed, and rushed over in a flash. Huang Bing, be careful, Qinlei followed with a worried look on his face. Butler Xiaoqiu and Sakura Gongswili frowned, looking very unhappy. At this time, Lin Yi stretched out a hand and put it on Huang Bing. With a little force, he was pulled back to the aisle. At this time, Li Qiuyu rushed over and hugged Huang Bing. He gently laid him on the ground. Li Qiuyu's eyes were bloodshot, and sadness and anger rushed to his heart. Qinlei had also come to Huang Bing at this time, and the two held Huang Bing's hand. Huang Bing's condition was not good. His eyes were full of black silk threads, and his body was trembling slightly. Extremely weak, accompanied by resentment entering the body, vitality was extracted, and his various organs were constantly failing. Death was only one step away from him. Huang Bing opened his mouth, unable to say a word, looking at Qin Lei and Li Qiuyu, as if he wanted to say something. But in the end, accompanied by a violent convulsion, Huang Bing opened his eyes and swallowed his last breath. Huang Bing, Li Qiuyu looked ugly and shouted loudly. Qin Lei's face was livid, his right hand clenched into a fist, and the sound of crackling, the friction of bones, his anger accumulated to the extreme. Sakuramiya surely looked at the scene and was also slightly silent. These three were mercenaries that she had found. Unexpectedly, one of them died just as the mission began. Li Qiuyu and Qin Lei squatted beside Huang Bing for a long time. Li Qiuyu stretched out her hand and closed Huang Bing's eyelids. Her face was calm, but a trace of anger and hatred in her eyes could not be eliminated. Clang! The sword in her hand flashed out of the sheath. She stretched out her hand, and the sword passed over her palm, and a stream of blood gushed out. The blood covered her left hand. She bent down and drew the blood on Huang Bing's eyelids, leaving 3 blood marks. Qin Lei also drew out the dagger at this time and drew a blood mark on his left hand. Similarly, he used his blood to leave 3 blood marks on Huang Bing's right eyelid. This is a ritual for mercenaries to bury their dead companions. Lin Yi didn't care about their rituals. His eyes fell on Li Qiuyu's sword, which was a dark blue sword. The traces of patterns in the sword seemed to form some strange patterns. The sword body was as clear as crystal, reflecting a faint light. This sword contained a strange power, which was very unusual. Qin Lei looked at Huang Bing, his eyes showing determination. "Don't worry, we will definitely avenge you." At this time, Li Qiuyu turned and looked at Sakuramiya Swilly. "Miss Sakuramiya, Huang Bing is dead, and we will continue this mission. But if you encounter the vengeful spirit who killed Huang Bing, please give it to me. My Bishuang sword is an ancient weapon that can kill vengeful spirits." Clang! With a crisp sound, the green sword was sheathed. Sakuramiya Swilly nodded. "Don't worry, if you encounter a vengeful spirit, I will let you get what you want." At this time, Qin Lei walked to Li Qiuyu, took out the bandage gauze, and wrapped Li Qiuyu's left palm. Then he also bandaged the wound on his left hand. A minute later, Li Qiuyu looked at Sakuramiya surely and said, "Miss Sakuramiya, let's continue. Qin Lei, go turn on the lighting system here." Li Qiuyu took out a high-power flashlight from his backpack and turned it on. The light source kept sweeping around the few people, and the entire passage was as bright as day. She looked around vigilantly, and Xiaoqiu also stood up at this time, standing side by side with Li Qiuyu. Lin Yi was very calm. In this world, he had seen many cruel scenes. For example, the basement of Chang Sui's house, the piles of corpses, cruel and vicious. You can know how vicious Chang Sui's heart is. The miserable end of the maid in Hongliang mansion. And what happened to the people killed by the maid who turned into a vengeful spirit? Huang Bing's death is just one of countless tragedies. A glimmer of green light flashed across his eyes, and his spiritual waves had almost recovered along the way. He looked around and wanted to check if there was any danger around. Huang Bing was possessed by a vengeful spirit, but he didn't feel anything at all. This is very dangerous, maybe a vengeful spirit is targeting him. At this dangerous moment, he would not be stingy with his spiritual waves to prevent it. Under the gaze of Zhenming, there was a strong resentment here, and the source of the resentment came from a passage opposite. The resentment gushed out like billowing smoke and rushed here. However, there was no shadow of the vengeful spirit around, and the vengeful spirit that attacked Huang Bing just now was nowhere to be seen. Looking back at the way he came, he suddenly frowned slightly, thinking about everything. Interesting, really interesting. On the ground where they came from, there were some substances with a faint smell at intervals. Lin Yi's eyes can see not only energy, but all visible and invisible things. It seems that this mission is not simple. Clang. With a slight sound, the sound of mechanical operation sounded, and the white light instantly lit up from the top of the head, illuminating the sewage treatment center. Lin Yi stopped the True Destiny solution and looked in the direction of the sewage treatment center. The sewage treatment center is very huge, with many steel platforms and walkways crisscrossing inside. The House of Everything I Created. Author, Yinian Luan Tianji. Chapter 34. There is a stainless steel iron bridge inside the platform, which is always connected to the sewer step walkway under their feet. Because of the darkness just now, everyone couldn't see clearly, but now everything is clearly exposed to everyone's sight. There are 4 iron bridges in total, leading to the 4 directions of the hollow. At the same time, they are returned at the sewage treatment center platform to form a network that can reach any place on the platform. Li Qiuyu turned to look at the crowd. Mr. Lin, Miss Yinjiang, and Butler Xiaoqiu, please go in the middle. Qin Lei, you walk in front and I'll walk in the back. Qin Lei nodded and walked onto the iron bridge with his big shield in hand. Writing this, I hope readers will remember our domain name Taiwan Novel Network Rightward Arrow. This iron bridge is not wide and can only accommodate 1 person walking. Butler Xiaoqiu looked at Lin Yi and said, Mr. Lin, please go ahead. After all, you are good at dealing with resentful spirits. You may encounter wraiths on the iron bridge on the platform of the sewage treatment center. You can walk behind Qin Lei for easy support. Lin Yi smiled slightly and said, no problem. As he said that, he followed Qin Lei with a smile. Swinging and swinging, it looked like an outing, with no tension at all. Li Qiuyu, who was walking in the aisle, looked at Lin Yi, who looked calm, and felt a trace of anger in his heart. A brother in his team died, and he was immersed in grief, but he still had to carry out the mission. Lin Yi looked so relaxed and showed no respect at all for this serious task, which made Li Qiuyu very uncomfortable. However, she was a mercenary and managed her personal emotions very well. Although she didn't like Lin Yi, she didn't show it at all. If something happens later, I won't care. Anyway, my mission is to protect Miss Sakuranomiya. Ya. A group of 5 people climbed onto the iron banqiao and walked towards the sewage treatment platform. The iron bridge is composed of steel plates and steel pipes, painted with red paint. The red paint has peeled off in some places, exposing the stainless steel inside. Lin Yi seemed careless, but in fact, the spiritual waves and energy had already circulated throughout his body and could explode at any time to hurt others. A huge roar sounded in the sewage treatment center, and the water surface roared. Turbid sewage impurities cover the water surface, and an unpleasant smell hits your nose. Dong dong dong. The collision of steel plates and footsteps continued, and dozens of seconds later, they boarded the sewage treatment plant. This large-scale equipment is composed of countless components and covers an area of hundreds of square meters. There are also narrow iron bridges on the platform of the processing center that lead to various parts. Under the bridge is either sewage or some kind of component. It's like a maze of steel machinery. The maze is filled with the humming sound of machinery. After setting foot here, everyone became obviously more cautious. Li Qiuyu said, Miss Yinggong, the environment here is very dangerous, and our hearing is almost blocked. Everyone had better look in one direction to avoid the scene just now and being attacked by the evil spirits. At the same time, pay attention to everyone's situation to prevent being possessed by evil spirits without knowing it. This time he learned his lesson, and Li Qiuyu arranged it more carefully. His face was serious, the Bishuang sword in his hand was unsheathed, and his murderous intent was fierce. The iron bridge on the platform of the sewage treatment center is relatively small, about 1 meter wide, and can accommodate 2 people walking side by side. Li Qiuyu walked at the end, turning his back to everyone to protect him. Butler Xiaoqiu faced the right side, Shirley Yinjiang stood on the left side, Qin Lei held up his shield and moved forward, and Lin Yi was behind Qin Lei. Shirley Sakuramiya said at this time, When we get to the place where the group disappearance occurred later, I will conduct a careful investigation. Just take good defense, especially Mr. Lin Yi. I asked you to come here to deal with all the ghost incidents. I hope what happened to Huang Bing won't happen again. Otherwise I will doubt whether you are strong enough to handle this matter. Lin Yi smiled lightly when he heard Yinjiang Shirley's words. Understand, what just happened was just an accident. Such accidents will not happen all the time. But Ms. Sakuranomiya still has to be careful. After all, this kind of thing is risky. Not everything can go smoothly, especially when other factors are involved. Sakuramiya Shirley didn't say anything when she heard this, she just frowned. I know, just do your own thing. Lin Yi nodded with a smile, the true light of his eyes flashing, and he glanced around. Every few seconds, he makes an observation. The resentment around them was very strong, but there was no trace of the resentful spirits. It seemed that they had no interest in appearing here at all. Amid the roar, Li Qiuyu looked at the tablet in his hand, and a three-dimensional model appeared on it. It seems to be a model of the sewage treatment center platform, showing their location. We are now on the first floor of the wastewater treatment center. The location where the mass disappearance occurred is located to the west of the first floor. There is a resting platform there, which is where the staff of the sewage treatment center usually rest. A total of more than 30 people were resting there at the time, but in the end they were all missing. This is the clue left by the first group of people who entered here to investigate. Li Qiuyu explained with a cold expression. Surely Sakuramiya nodded, let's go and take a look. Turning his head to look at Lin Yi, Mr. Lin, we have arrived at the scene of the vengeful spirit accident. The next exploration here depends on your professional knowledge. So, you need to take the lead. Lin Yi smiled slightly, no problem. As soon as the voice fell, Lin Yi had already walked to the west. Li Qiuyu pointed out the direction of the west, and Lin Yi only needed to follow the iron bridge straight. The group was silent. Li Qiuyu and Qin Lei walked at the end, vigilantly guarding Sakura Palaswili and Xiaoqiu Butler. A yellow talisman paper appeared in Lin Yi's hand. A faint golden essence flowed in his hand, ready to be injected into it at any time. This trick learned from the master of the phantom spirit was used directly by him. This thing is very economical in spiritual waves, and only needs essence to have an effect on the vengeful spirit. Spiritual waves are his trump card, and if they can be consumed, they will not be consumed. A minute later, the group came to the rest platform on the west. As soon as he stepped in here, Lin Yi frowned, and the resentment was pervasive here. Such a heavy resentment. Under the spiritual eyes opened by Sakuramiya Shirley, everyone can see the resentment. At this time, on this platform, the resentment that was as black as ink and almost submerged the entire rest area floated here. There is a passage on the platform that extends all the way to the sewage channel opposite, which is one of the three main sewage outflows in the sewage treatment center. After Lin Yi took a look, let's go, it seems that the source of the problem is in the sewage channel. Sakuramiya Shirley and others also saw the source of the resentment, and with the increasingly pungent stench, they all wrinkled their noses. The House of Everything I Created. Author, Yinian Luan Tianji. Chapter 35. At this time, Li Qiuyu took off her backpack and took out 5 breathing filter masks from it. This is the latest type of breathing filter mask, with 2 modes. First, it can filter all kinds of poisonous gas and odor. Second, it can automatically start the oxygen switch in the absence of oxygen to maintain the oxygen supply for life for 30 minutes. Awesome, good stuff, Lin Yi praised. Li Qiuyu's face was cold. In a place like the sewer, the air is not flowing and all kinds of dangerous gases are dense. If you don't prepare properly to enter here, you are looking for death. As she said, she distributed the masks to everyone. When it came to Lin Yi, she raised her hand and threw it to him, as if she didn't want to have contact with him. Lin Yi took the mask and didn't care about her attitude. This mask only covered the lower half of the face, not the whole face, and did not affect the field of vision. After putting on the mask, the pungent smell disappeared instantly, and Lin Yi took a breath of intoxication. He said in a deep voice, "Yes, this is sweet air." Looking at Lin Yi's intoxicated look, Sakuramiya Shirley and others twitched their mouths and their foreheads were throbbing with veins. Sakuramiya Shirley took a deep breath, and felt an urge to beat someone up. "Mr. Lin, we are here to solve the problem, please be careful." Good self-cultivation made Sakuramiya Shirley hold back the urge in her heart. A thought flashed through her mind, did I find the wrong person? This person is too unprofessional. Lin Yi shrugged and glanced at Sakuramiya Shirley, don't worry, believe me. I am professional." Although Lin Yi was smiling and didn't care about anything, his eyes were cold and emotionless. He has always been a person who is completely different on the outside and inside. Seemingly cynical, but actually as cold as a stone in his heart. The life in his previous life had already made him see through everything. Now he only has emotional fluctuations about things that interest him. Leading the way, Lin Yi walked towards the sewer full of resentment. Under the illumination of the small light above his head, he entered the dark sewer. Sakuramiya Shirley and others followed closely. Not long after they left, a figure in a black robe came here. A dark breath of death permeated his body. Cold and deadly, just standing there, people thought he was the source of death. With his arrival, a resentful spirit suddenly floated out from under the sewage. His face was pale, like a highly rotten corpse, and he was wrapped in black resentment. He was dressed in the clothes of a sewer worker, looking at the black shadow with resentment, malice, and anger. He was jealous that this person was still alive and could feel warmth, sunshine, and delicious food. It stretched out its hands, and both hands were completely twisted. The fingers and nails were completely twisted, but the tips of the nails were unusually sharp. It floated towards the black shadow, and the resentment was like smoke. The temperature around the black shadow suddenly dropped to 0 degrees, and a frost appeared on the iron bridge and railings under his feet. Huh! A cold breath rose from behind, and the vengeful spirit suddenly pounced behind the black shadow. He blew a strong vengeance at the back of the black shadow's head, dark, cold and vicious. At this moment, the black shadow turned his head and looked at the vengeful spirit with cold eyes. What kind of eyes are these, full of death, without the slightest human breath, as if he is the god of death? The vengeful spirit seemed to be frightened by this terrifying look, and it didn't have time to react. The black shadow suddenly opened his mouth, revealing his white teeth, and a dark vortex appeared in his mouth. A cold suction came out from the vortex, instantly enveloping the vengeful spirit. The vengeful spirit seemed to have seen its natural enemy, let out a terrified roar, and retreated madly behind him. The vengeance was stirring around him, and his emotions were extremely excited. But this suction force is so huge that it has a great attraction to the resentful spirits and resentment. The repairman's resentful spirit struggled and roared wildly, but his voice seemed to be sucked away by the vortex. Wisps of black air were drawn from the body and rolled into the mouth of the black shadow. As the resentment was constantly drawn, the resentful spirit's body became more and more transparent and smaller. Finally, it was completely transformed into a wisp of resentment and was sucked into the mouth of the black shadow, disappearing in the dark vortex. After swallowing the resentful spirit transformed by the sewer repairman, the black shadow seemed very satisfied. A cold and cruel voice sounded, "The taste is not bad, the resentment is strong, it seems that this time I have come to a good place. You can have a full meal and kill the target at the same time, and you will gain a lot. He he he." With a hint of neurotic laughter, it was full of madness, coldness, and cruelty. The terrifying aura emanating from his body seemed to make the resentful spirits lurking around him feel the danger. The diffused resentment disappeared as these hidden resentful spirits went away. As the saying goes, vengeful spirits are afraid of evil people. Even a being more ferocious than vengeful spirits will not be close to them. The eyes of this mysterious figure who looked like the god of death were pitch black, completely covered by the strange black power. In his sight, the world was a dead gray, without a single color. All objects and energy existed in the form of lines. His sight moved, and soon he determined his target and looked at the sewer filled with resentment. Have you entered? It's just right. Let's solve it together with the vengeful spirits here. My death book can go a step further, and maybe it can hit the second level. The figure walked towards the passage with infinite black energy. The pale face, dark eyes, and windless hair were as scary as a real wraith, or even scarier than a wraith. In the sewer, Lin Yi moved forward slowly, his eyes constantly scanning the surroundings. The spiritual wave flows in the body, slowly recovering the consumption along the way. At this time, the spiritual wave has returned to 80% level. The sewers here have sewage flowing across them all year round, and there are a lot of disgusting substances clinging to the walls of the sewers. There is more and more black resentment, and the temperature is getting lower and lower. It seemed like they were heading to Hades rather than walking in a sewer. In the dark world, there was only light from the small lamps on their heads and the searchlight in Qin Lei's hand. Call. There seemed to be something floating past where the light was shining. Li Qiuyu saw clearly, be careful, there is something. Lin Yi narrowed his eyes, and a trace of green light flickered, sweeping around. He said indifferently, let's go, he's just an ordinary wraith, no harm. His eyes caught the ghost of a sewer worker, looking at them 10 meters in front of them. The whole body of the resentful spirit is transparent, almost in a state of dissipation, and there is no danger. The resentful spirit of the sewer worker had a pale face and dull eyes, as if he didn't even have basic consciousness. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The House of Everything I Created. Author, Yinian Luan Tianji. Chapter 36. He was attracted by his obsession in his previous life, his yearning for light. A group of people from Lin Yi walked past him, and he could vaguely hear a faint voice. Xuanhuan. Lin Yi shook his head and stopped, turned around and swung his right fist. A faint spiritual wave flashed by. Send you on your way. Bang. A faint sound of bubbles bursting sounded, and the sewer worker instantly exploded and disappeared. Lin Yi's spiritual wave has mysterious characteristics and has infinite lethality to resentful spirits. He didn't know whether these resentful spirits were completely destroyed, or after being broken, their souls entered the underworld of this world's legend. But it didn't matter, his mission was just to send them away from the world of the living. Sakuramiya Shirley and the others were slightly stunned when they saw Lin Yi destroy the resentful spirit expressionlessly. But they didn't say anything. After all, the resentful spirit was not human. If it was not eliminated, it was hard to guarantee that it would cause problems at any time. When Sakuramiya Shirley saw Lin Yi take action, a gleam of light appeared in her eyes. His power is very strange. He can actually hurt the vengeful spirits at the level of mortals. This is not the strange power he uses, but pure power of his own. This person must have an unusual origin, said Sakuramiya Swili with a thoughtful look. Butler Xiaoqiu had a calm expression, but Li Qiuyu and Qin Lei were surprised. They were open to the spirit eyes, so they could naturally see the vengeful spirits. Lin Yi's method surprised them even more. They couldn't kill the vengeful spirits with bare hands. As they continued to move forward, the coldness was like a sharp thorn that penetrated the bones. It kept floating towards the few people, trying to pierce their bodies. A light white frost covered the surroundings of the sewer, and the dark resentment was floating everywhere. Li Qiuyu's face became more and more solemn, and the Bishuang sword in his hand had already been unsheathed. In this darkness, it emitted a trace of green light. This sword seemed to have an inexplicable magic, and the coldness around seemed to disappear a lot as the sword was unsheathed. Sakura Miyaswili glanced at the Bishuang sword in Li Qiuyu's hand and nodded, "This sword is good, it has the effect of breaking evil." Li Qiuyu nodded, "This is a sword passed down from my ancestors. It is said that it has killed evil spirits. It is a treasure passed down from generation to generation in our family." Lin Yi looked back and a green light flashed in his eyes. In the Bishuang sword, he saw some energy flowing slowly. There were also some mysterious words and patterns covering the whole body of the long sword. Suddenly he stopped, and everyone stopped too. The light above Lin Yi shone on the wall, where a man in a sewer worker's uniform was sitting there. The light shone carefully on this man, and Lin Yi shook his head. "He is dead, and it seems that he was extremely frightened before he died." The sewer worker was covered with white frost all over his body, his face was terrified, his mouth was wide open, his eyes were bulging, and his face was full of fear. Seeing his appearance, Li Qiuyu quickly took out the tablet in his hand and began to look for pictures. A few minutes later, he said, "This man is one of the workers who disappeared at that time. His name is Zhang Lei, and he is 35 years old. He has a wife and 3 children at home." Sakura Miya surely was silent after hearing this. Although she was from the wealthy class, she understood the life of the lower class. She was not a spoiled lady who turned a deaf ear to the outside world. Xiaoqiu came over and stretched out his hand to close Zhang Lei's eyes. "Dust to dust, dust to dust, we will solve your hatred for you." Lin Yi glanced at Xiaoqiu, a gleam in his eyes, and whispered, "Let's go, this is just the beginning." The group became more and more silent, and the situation in the sewer became more and more weird. From time to time, you can see corpses falling in various forms in the sewer passage. Some lie on the ground, trying to climb forward with their hands, as if something is pressing on him from behind, making him unable to get up. Some are twitching all over, lying on the ground with twisted bodies, and their faces are full of horror. There are also piles of corpses falling into the sewer, freezing into piles of frozen corpses. The further they went, the weirder the atmosphere became, and the more terrifying the scene became. Corpses kept appearing, telling them that this place was very dangerous. Lin Yi suddenly frowned. Although he was wearing a gas mask, he still smelled a faint pungent smell. The smell of formalin. Lin Yi looked at the water surface of the sewer with deep eyes. Under the dark light, he could not see anything. A flash of green light, and the scene in front of him changed drastically, with countless lights flashing. He saw a layer of other substances flowing on the water surface, and a stream of smells was emanating from this substance. "It's really formalin. How could there be such a thing here?" His eyes quickly swept around, and Lin Yi shook his head, and the true destiny in his eyes dimmed. At this time, other people also smelled this unstoppable smell and frowned. After advancing a few hundred meters, the coldness around them had already made them feel the pressure. A huge sewer space appeared in front of them. There are 7 sewer passages here, and they are all dark. One of the cave entrances was blocked by countless bricks and stones, and everyone's attention was attracted to this cave entrance at the first moment. In Ling's eyes, countless resentments were floating out from here, and it was obvious that this was the source of everything. The strong resentment made them feel instinctively nauseous. Their lights could not illuminate the depths of the cave. The hearts of several people were filled with chills. Lin Yi whispered, "Be careful. Behind this passage, I'm afraid that's the source of all the vengeful spirit incidents." Their vigilance was raised to the highest level. Everyone walked along the passage towards the cave entrance where the bricks and stones collapsed. When they arrived at the entrance of the passage, the upper half of the blocked cave entrance almost collapsed, and only the lower half remained intact. Lin Yi kicked out with a huge force on the bricks and stones, and a roar sounded. Clang dang dang. The broken stones were scattered all over the ground, and the entrance of the cave was completely exposed. A gloomy wind blew, accompanied by countless grievances, and several people were in the bone-piercing cold. Almost uncontrollable, shivering at the same time. Lin Yi looked ahead, where countless black air was permeated, and the deep grievances were simply too thick to dissolve. Countless grievances accompanied the complete collapse of the blockage, gushing out and submerging the surroundings. For a full minute, several people stood at the entrance of the passage without moving, and the cold breath rushed to the distance. A thin layer of ice condensed on the surface of the sewer, and the walls and cave ceilings were covered with white frost where the resentment passed. Sakura Miyasuili's face showed solemnity. Such a heavy resentment, I don't know how many people died in here. Li Qiuyu and Qin Lei also saw the terrifying resentment with the help of their spiritual eyes. In the coldness of the resentment, the two of them encouraged the qi in their bodies to barely resist the cold. The two of them looked solemn, and horror flashed in their eyes. The House of Everything I Created. Author, Yinian Luan Tianji. Chapter 37. They often travel around the world of mercenaries, so they naturally know a lot of information about ghost incidents. Li Qiuyu looked at Sakura Miyasuili solemnly. Ms. Sakura Miya, I'm afraid we are not prepared enough this time. I thought it was just an ordinary ghost incident, but now it seems that it is not that simple. I am afraid that Qin Lei and I are not strong enough. If we continue to move forward, I think it will be difficult to complete the task. Ms. Sakura Miya, how about ending this operation? Sakura Miyasuili was silent when she heard this. At this point, she also found that the sewer accident was far from being as simple as an ordinary ghost incident. Looking at the collapse of the sewer blockage, she had some guesses about this ghost incident. Logically speaking, turning back here is the best choice. But she didn't have much time, and there was no more time for her to prepare. After a moment of silence, her eyes showed a hint of sharpness. This mission cannot be stopped, keep moving forward. Turning to look at Li Qiuyu, I know you don't have many means to deal with the ghosts. These are two magic weapon talismans, you and Qin Lei stick them on your weapons. These two magic weapon talismans will increase your ability to damage the ghosts. This is my support equipment for this mission. The talismans are permanent items. After sticking them on, your weapons will have 3 hours of evil breaking time. After that, you can use them again as long as you expose them to the sun for 10 days. 2 yellow talismans appeared in Sakura Miyasuili's hands. They looked ordinary, but they were obviously not made of ordinary paper. Li Qiuyu stared at Sakura Miyasuili, looking at the other party's firm eyes, thinking of his dead companions. Take a deep breath, reach out to take the 2 talismans, and hand one to Qin Lei. Since Miss Sakura Miya insists, let's continue. Li Qiuyu pursed her lips and said. Seeing Li Qiuyu take the talisman, Sakura Miyasuili turned to look at Lin Yi. Mr. Lin, what do you think? Lin Yi smiled faintly. Don't worry, I take money from others to help them get rid of disasters. Although this place looks fierce, I can still deal with it. If it really comes to a dangerous moment, I don't think Miss Sakura Miya will go it alone. Sakura Miyasuili nodded. Okay, then keep moving forward. Lin Yi turned to face the deep block sewer. He stepped over the remaining blocking wall and stepped on the old sewer ground. There is no sewage flowing out here, it is dry and dead. The light shines deep, and nothing can be seen at a distance of 5 meters. A thick darkness seems that even light cannot shine in. Da-da-da. The footsteps sounded, and they moved forward slowly. As they moved away from the entrance, the sound of water flowing in the sewer slowly disappeared. Hoo-hoo. The breathing of several people and the faint footsteps were the only sound sources here. Lin Yi walked in front and looked back every 5 seconds. He was very alert, as there was an unprecedented resentment here. The resentment was even more serious than that in the underground secret room of Chang Sui's house. He had seen many resentful spirits, and they liked to quietly follow behind others and absorb their vitality bit by bit. There were many kinds of resentful spirits, some were rational, some were like beasts, and some changed between the two. There were also completely twisted, evil, and crazy beings. Under limited light, they came to the end of the sewer. What they saw was no longer the structure of the sewer, but 3 large forked passages. The ground was no longer the sewer ditch, but a flat ground covered with white substances. Is the sewer in front a disguise? To cover up this place, Lin Yi thought in his heart, looking at the 3 passages. Butler Xiaoqiu looked solemn. He bent down and touched the ground, and said in a deep voice, "This seems to be some kind of secret facility. This is fine aggregate white soil, a building material invented and produced during the last war. This thing is solid, 3 times harder than granite. It was used to build various secret facilities during the last war." Everyone looked at Butler Xiaoqiu, and finally their eyes fell on the ground. The ground looked very rough, as pale as bone. Sakuramiya surely said in a deep voice, "This is probably a place like the Imperial test base during the war. This kind of place has been researching some dangerous things. We have to be very careful next." The words of Butler Xiaoqiu and Sakuramiya surely made Lin Yi more alert. Li Qiuyu and Qin Lei held a sword and a shield respectively, and the magic weapon talisman had been attached to their weapons. Lin Yi looked at the 3 passages, his eyes flashing with spiritual light. He was observing the source of the resentment. Of the 3 passages, 2 of them had strong resentment, and the other one had very little resentment. After thinking for a while, Lin Yi walked towards the first one on the right. "Go this way first." Sakuramiya surely raised her eyebrows when she heard this. She could naturally see the concentration of resentment in the air. This passage was obviously much less crowded, but she did not object and followed Lin Yi to the passage on the right. After walking for more than 10 meters, a door appeared on the right side of the passage. Under the light, the 3 big characters "Security Department" were written on the doorplate. Lin Yi's eyes lit up. This passage is probably where the staff here rest or work, it should be safer. Several people nodded when they heard this. Butler Xiaoqiu frowned, feeling a little uneasy. She turned her head slightly and looked behind, her eyes narrowed slightly. Li Qiuyu glanced at Butler Xiaoqiu. "Butler Xiaoqiu, is there any problem?" She frowned and looked behind her, holding the Bishuang sword tightly in her hand. Butler Xiaoqiu smiled slightly, "Nothing, just a little nervous in this environment." Lin Yi whispered in front, "Everyone be careful here, don't separate." Came to the door of the security department, looked at the iron door, stretched out his hand and gently pushed it. The iron door slowly opened, and a stale smell came to the face. The light above shone into the door, an ordinary security room, several iron cabinets, rusty. Several tables and chairs, obviously the office of the security department staff here. Walking in, Lin Yi's voice was low and powerful, "Everyone, search this room to see if there is any written information. First, we have to figure out what this place is used for, so that we can find out the source of the supernatural events here." Li Qiuyu and Qin Lei were obviously very good at these things, and immediately began to search the metal cabinets and tables in the security department. Butler Xiaoqiu and Sakuramiya Swilly stood in the room on guard and did not participate in their search. A few minutes later, Lin Yi, Qin Lei and Li Qiuyu took 2 notebooks and put them on the table. Butler Xiaoqiu and Sakuramiya Swilly also came over, and they were also very interested in the information here. The House of Everything I Created. Author, Yinian Luan Tianji. Chapter 38. Li Qiuyu picked up the first notepad and opened it with numbers written on it. Red Lotus Calendar, May 13, 1967. Number, sign in number 12258. Red Lotus Calendar, May 13, 1967. Number, sign in number 12245. Red Lotus Calendar, September 13, 1968. Number, Sign in number 12456. On the last page, several people saw the last date. But when they saw the date, everyone frowned. Because the date looked familiar, but they couldn't remember it for a while. I heard Butler Xiaoqiu suddenly say in a deep voice, "I know, this is the day when the Empire completely defeats the rebels. The day the rebel commander Xuanhuan issued a declaration of defeat." Everyone was shocked when they heard this. That was the moment of victory for the entire empire, which completely became the ruling body of the Red Lotus realm. Shirley Sakuramiya said calmly, "In other words, this place was closed on the day the war was won." Lin Yi shook his head, "It's so simple. How many things will those rulers do on the day of victory? How can they afford to take care of a laboratory? Let's read the second one." Li Qiuyu opened the second notebook and frowned. There is something stuck inside this book. Only one page can be opened, and nothing on it can be seen clearly. Looking at the dark and dry adhesive on the side of the notepad, Lin Yi frowned. Li Qiuyu's voice deepened, "This is a trace of dried blood that has been around for a long time." "Where did you get it?" Lin Yi said solemnly. "In that corner," Li Qiuyu pointed to the corner at the end of the room next to the metal cabinet. Lin Yi walked over in a few steps, leaned down and watched carefully, his eyes lit up with a glimmer of green light. On the wall in this corner, he saw dried blood stains and 3 small deep holes, which seemed to be pierced by sharp objects. Some traces of dragging on the ground were invisible due to his Tao Ji Zhenming. After a few seconds, he stood up with a gloomy expression, "There should be someone here." But the man died, and his body was dragged away by something. He glanced at a few people and whispered, "It wasn't done by humans." Several people were shocked when they heard this, and a hint of horror arose in their hearts. On the day the war ended, no one signed in here anymore. At the same time, someone died in the security department, and the body was moved away, which is unusual. Li Qiuyu's face turned solemn, "It's not easy here. Everyone must be careful of unknown dangers in the next search. None of us can leave the other's sight and we can't be more than 3 meters apart." The experienced Li Qiuyu quickly grasped the current situation and put forward suggestions. After hearing this, Shirley Sakuramiya took a deep breath, moved her arm slightly, and a soft sword slipped from her hand. This soft sword is green all over, like jade, and the lines of countless flowers and branches on it are very beautiful. Lin Yi took a look and raised his eyebrows. In his eyes, the soft sword shone with a pure aura. The appearance of this aura caused the looming resentment around him to quickly dissipate. An evil-breaking weapon. Sakuramiya Shirley's cold voice sounded, "Everyone, act with caution." Lin Yi looked at the security department that had finished searching, shook his head, "Let's go, there is no information here." He was the first to walk out of the room and into the passage outside. I looked around, but there was no sign of anything ghostly. He continued walking deeper into the passage, and after a few steps, the second door appeared in his eyes. Infirmary. Slowly opening the door, there was a very ordinary medical room. 3 hospital beds, some equipment and medicine cabinets, a consultation table, a chair, and some medical equipment are placed in the room. Several people searched again, but found no information except some common cases. However, after rummaging around, Lin Yi keenly discovered the problem. There are a lot of people here, but they are all called by code names. Qin Lei was stunned when he heard this. "Why?" Lin Yi smiled and said, "Look at the list of cases. No one has a name, only a number. The same is true on the security section sign-in form just now. It can be seen that everyone here will not call each other by name, but will confirm their identity by number." Everyone nodded when they heard this, and Li Qiuyu said solemnly, "It's so confidential here. There is a strict confidentiality system even between members. I'm afraid there's a big secret hidden here." A glimpse of the leopard can be seen through the pipe. This strict confidentiality system makes this place even more extraordinary. At this time, Lin Yi looked at Shirley Yinjiang, Miss Yinjiang, as a big family in the Red Lotus world. Does your family know what secrets the empire hides in the sewers? Shirley Sakuramiya shook her head when she heard this. 100 years after the establishment of the federal government, a civil war happened inexplicably 30 years ago. Although our Sakuronomiya family is powerful, there are some things that we don't know how to do, and we don't dare to ask about them at will. So I can't answer this question for you. Suddenly, Lin Yi's expression changed. Be careful. A punch flew out, pointing directly at Sakuramiya Shirley's back. There, a dark, rotten illusory arm was grabbing at the back of Sakuramiya Shirley's head. Lin Yi's fist flashed with green gold light, and it instantly collided with the sharp claw. Bang! There was a muffled sound and a shrill and ethereal scream. The arm disappeared out of thin air, as if it had never appeared. At this time, the room underwent a strange change. The smell of decay filled the room, and in an instant it seemed to have experienced thousands of years. His hair stood on end, and Lin Yi hurriedly said, "Get out quickly, it's very dangerous here." The next moment he opened the True Fate Daoji, and a strange scene appeared in his sight. A strange black color was eroding the room, and the source was on the wall of the 3 beds. There, a dark shadow of a dark face appeared on the wall, which seemed to be a human face. Countless black lines like hair were spreading rapidly along the wall. Black silk threads grew rapidly along the wall like a spider web. The silk threads twisted and twisted, emitting wisps of black smoke. The whole room was shrouded in black smoke, and the decay seemed endless. Lin Yi pulled everyone and rushed to the exit of the room quickly. Bang! A door closing sounded. There was an inexplicable force that forced the door of the ward closed. Several people were trapped in this smoky ward, but Lin Yi couldn't just sit there and wait for death. His whole body was filled with a cyan gold light, and his arms instantly became thicker. On the exit door, black silk threads had spread here, covering the entire door. Lin Yi's hands were like a gun, and his fists fell densely, bombarding the door covered with black silk threads. Rumble. Huge collisions and roars continued to sound. The violent power, the cyan gold light, and the black silk threads spreading on the door were entangled together. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The House of Everything I Created. Author, Yinian Luan Tianji. Chapter 39. A strange squeak sounded. This sound was full of pain, as if some hungry ghost was screaming under Lin Yi's power. The screams were endless, shocking everyone's heart. Li Qiuyu and Qin Lei's faces turned purple, and their heads felt dizzy. Obviously, they were also impacted by this tragic and strange sound. The two of them were shaky, and their bodies stopped involuntarily. The black smoke behind them was spreading towards everyone. The door quickly sank and broke under the storm of Lin Yi's fist. Accompanied by a harsh metal twisting sound, the door was opened with a bang. Lin Yi rushed out first, and Sakuramiya Shirley followed closely behind Lin Yi. At this time, housekeeper Xiaoqiu noticed the shaky Li Qiuyu and Qin Lei. His eyes flashed, and he stretched out his hands, grabbed the two people on both sides, and rushed out of the door. At this time, countless black silk threads were spreading towards the broken door at the broken metal door on the door. It seemed that these black silk threads would close the door again. By a hair's breadth, the three rushed out of the gap in the gate before it was completely closed. 10 seconds later, the gate was blocked by countless black threads, and no exit could be seen. Lin Ling and others stood in the passage, looking at the gate behind them. At the entrance of the gate closed by black threads, a miserable face emerged, looking at everyone viciously. The distorted face seemed to show the countless pains he had suffered in the past, and there was a little green color in the miserable eyes. It was a completely distorted look, and a look of disgust for all life. Lin Yi looked at the distorted face emerging from the black threads, revealing an inexplicable look. Sakura Miyaswili looked at the face with a serious expression, and her voice was cold. This is a bound resentful spirit. He is bound in this ward and cannot leave. Anyone who enters this ward is his prey. This person must have suffered a lot of torture in his life, and died here at the same time, so he became like this. And the place where this bound resentful spirit is located is very dangerous, which is equivalent to a separate world. Here their power will increase several times. Fortunately, we came out quickly, otherwise it would be dangerous. Let's go. This kind of bound resentful spirit has a deep resentment, even people on the top of the rush cannot purify them. Lin Yi frowned, turned around and walked deeper into the passage. After a few steps, they saw a new gate. This gate looks very old, and there is not much difference from the previous gate. There are many dry black handprints on this gate. Butler Xiaoqiu looked at it for a few times and frowned. These are all dried human blood. It has been many years before it becomes like this. Li Qiuyu and Qin lay on the side, both of them had just calmed down. Everything they had just experienced in that strange ward shocked them mentally. At this moment, looking at the countless handprints on the door, the two of them couldn't help but reveal a trace of fear in their eyes. But Li Qiuyu was the captain of the mercenary team after all. He quickly stabilized his spirit and looked at these handprints carefully. Li Qiuyu looked at these handprints and suddenly whispered, "No, look at these handprints, they seem to be children's handprints." Others immediately looked at these handprints and were shocked. Lin Yi stretched out his hand and pushed the door at this time, but it couldn't be opened. It seemed that something was locked behind the door. Li Qiuyu looked at the gap in the door and said, "This door is locked from the back. It seems that when something attacked here, there was someone inside the door. Let me do it, my Bishuang sword cuts iron like mud." Several people made way, and Li Qiuyu walked to the front of the door, and the Bishuang sword in his hand flashed. Clang! The thing behind the door that locked the door was instantly cut off. Creak! Pushing the door open, the rotten door made a sound of metal friction. What he saw was a dried corpse, whose skin and flesh had long been dried up, without any elasticity, as if he had died for many years. Lin Yi bent down and carefully examined the mummy. The mummy was wearing a white coat, and seemed to be a doctor. After a careful inspection, Lin Yi found a sharp wound on his chest. He was killed, the wound is between the chest and abdomen, and he should have died of excessive bleeding. Sakura Miya surely walked to a desk in the room. There were many documents scattered on the desk, covered with dust. She waved her hand, a strong wind flashed, and all the dust gathered in her hands and turned into a ball of mud. Lin Yi took a look and thought to himself, "Awesome, this is the realm of strength. This Miss Sakura Miya has a stronger cultivation than me, and she is really powerful." Sakura Miya surely raised her hand to throw the mud aside, and her eyes fell on several documents. Since they all gathered around, looking at the documents on the table, they showed a strange look. They each reached out and picked up a document and began to read it. Top Secret File 1. Experimental Subject Number 1. Name. Age, 11 years old. Ability, born with a terrifying ability to make people hallucinate. Ability name. Experimental method, after strengthening drugs and surgery, the ability has reached an astonishing level, which can make people die in hallucinations. Control method, using parents as a threat, you can completely control it. Information record. Born, and his parents were controlled in the Superman laboratory. He began to undergo experiments at the age of 5. He was separated from his parents at the age of 8 and could only communicate remotely. The laboratory completely controlled the experimental subject number 1 through remote control. In fact, his parents were already dead, and the image and sound simulation system simulated the parent's state to control the experimental subject number 1. Many places in this document were erased by black lines and could not be seen clearly. But Lin Yi still saw the secret of this file. This is a laboratory. The purpose of the experiment was to surpass human power, and the time was decades ago. At that time, the world had not changed yet, and there was no extraordinary power in the world. Or it should be said that it was not that there was no extraordinary power, but that extraordinary power was very rare. It was almost impossible for the public to see it, or it was deliberately concealed by those in power. The dangerous power must be controlled by those in power. Lin Yi quickly figured it out. At this time, Sakuramiya surely looked at Lin Yi. Is the information in your hand also about the experiment? Yes, it's the number 1 test subject. What about you? Sakuramiya Shirley's face was serious. Here is the number 3 test subject. His ability is infinite regeneration. The specific information of this ability has been erased and cannot be seen at all. The number 1 test subject here records his ability. It is the ability to create hallucinations. The power of this hallucination can even kill people directly in the hallucination. It is very terrifying. The House of Everything I Created. Author, Yinian Luan Tianji. Chapter 40. This ability is very terrifying. It can make people fall into hallucinations without knowing it. Even if we are attacked, we may die. Lin Yi and Shirley Sakuragong looked at each other with a hint of solemnity in their eyes. Just listen to Shirley Sakuramiya say, I don't know what happened in the past 10 years. If these experimental subjects with mysterious abilities become wraiths, they are likely to retain their abilities in life. With the body of a resentful spirit and extraordinary abilities, this kind of superposition will make us very dangerous. Several other people also read the documents in their hands, but it seemed that the documents in their hands were not related to the experimental subjects. Taiwan Novel Network Rightward Arrow. Li Kaiyu said, I have a map here. It is a map of the underground experimental area. You can take a look. After hearing this, several people gathered around and spread the map in Li Kaiyu's hand on the table. The underground experimental area is divided into 3 sections, with a total of 3 passages. After taking a closer look, they discovered the 3 parts the experimental area was divided into. On the far right side of the map, the passage they took is the daily area. The medical room, security room, staff lounge, office, etc. are marked here. The middle one of the 3 passages seems to be the morgue, where all the corpses after experiments will be transported there for sealing. As for the passage on the far left, people with extraordinary abilities are transported from the outside, and they will conduct experiments and supervision there. I heard Butler Xiaoqiu whisper, it's written in my document that this place is called the Superman Laboratory. The purpose is to give ordinary soldiers extraordinary powers. During the last war, the Empire conducted many cruel and inhumane experiments here, resulting in the death of a large number of soldiers. We have to be more careful next. There are probably various monsters experimented during the Empire's time here. Li Kaiyu's face became even more ugly when he heard this. Miss Yanggong, this situation is completely beyond our expectations. It's beyond our capabilities. I suggest we get out of here. Return to the ground and report this matter to the Empire and let professionals deal with the danger here. Sakuramiya Shirley's face looked a little heavy. I think we need to take another look. I have my own reasons for coming down this time, and I have to solve many things by myself. At present, the dangers we encounter are within the scope of management and do not threaten our lives. So I still insist that we handle it ourselves. If something happens beyond our control, I won't bear it. Mr. Lin Yi, what do you think? Lin Yi smiled slightly, I don't care. I can handle all the ghosts I encounter now, so we can take another look. Li Kaiyu frowned when he heard this, but his employer insisted on his opinion. Another master who was responsible for getting rid of resentful spirits also thought it would be worthwhile to take another look, and she could no longer object. Butler Xiaoqiu on the side looked down at the map, with an inexplicable brilliance in his eyes. At this time, at the entrance of the 3 passages, a figure shrouded in black robes came here. After the strange figure arrived here, his eyes scanned the 3 passages. He frowned and said in a low voice, "There is still a passage here, what's going on?" The eyes filled with deathly silence revealed a fascinating cold light. After thinking for a moment, his eyes fell on the middle passage. The ground in the middle passage was originally a gray material, but now it is covered with dust. However, in the dark environment, the black shadow was not very clear. After thinking for a moment, he walked towards the passage in the middle. The whole body was filled with faint black smoke, floating and twisting, and there seemed to be countless skeleton faces flashing in it. Walking slowly along the passage, the shadow looked indifferent and seemed to have no fear of the dark world. Walking forward along the same passage, I continued for hundreds of meters and came to a metal gate. There is no handle on the door, there is only a number on the door. There are 3 words written on it, morgue. The black shadow frowned when he saw the word morgue. "Did you go to the wrong place?" After thinking about it, he turned around and left. But just as the black shadow turned around, there was a noise in the morgue. Clang. The sound of metal clashing sounded very harsh in the silent tunnel outside the morgue. The black shadow paused before turning away, then turned to look at the door of the morgue again. His brows suddenly furrowed, and his body flashed back several meters. Clang. Rumble. There was the sound of the collision of metal and the impact of objects, and the door of the morgue in front of him was blown away from the inside by a huge force. 2 metal doors flew out and landed heavily on the ground less than half a meter away from the black shadow. A cloud of dust flew under the pressure of the wind from the metal gate. Dust filled the sky, obscuring the shadows. The already dark and lightless passage became even more obscure. Even if this mysterious black figure has some degree of dark vision, it cannot see the specific scenery in the smoke. However, his sensitivity to danger allowed him to react in the next moment. He raised his right hand, and a black light enveloped his palm. A sword that seemed to be born in the underworld was struck from his hand. This knife light seemed to come from hell, depriving all life. Bang! A sharp muffled sound. The knife light hit something in the dust and mist. Along with the flash of the knife light, a sound of a heavy object falling to the ground was heard. The dust slowly dissipated, and the black shadow saw the thing that fell on the ground. It was a humanoid creature, all purple and blue, with a tattered white dress hanging on his body, which seemed to be the shroud worn by the dead. The purple humanoid object on the ground trembled all over and turned over from the ground. Roar! A terrifying roar was deafening. In the morgue behind the purple figure, roars came one after another. Roar! He! Hoarse, dry, as if he had not drunk water for countless years, full of the breath of the dead. The black-robed man looked at the purple humanoid creature in front of him, his pupils contracted, and he saw something incredible. It can actually resist my death sickle, which is interesting. Whoosh! With a slight sound, the black-robed man moved. The black smoke all over his body gathered in front of him, turning into a pitch-black sickle, and slammed down at the purple humanoid creature again. This time, the knife was not as casual as before. Rip! The air was torn apart, and the sharp black knife light hit the chest of the purple humanoid creature heavily. Facing the fierce attack, the purple humanoid creature stretched out his hands and grabbed the black-robed man. The speed of the black-robed man was too fast and too strong, and the speed of the death sickle was also amazingly fast. The knife light flashed, and the purple humanoid creature was chopped away and hit hard from behind.